Welcome to the presentation on the 2024-2025 FAFSA presented by Patty Heeman, Director of Financial Aid. I'm first going to start with some of the changes that were made for the 24-25 FAFSA filing year. First, the EFC that has been used for the past years has now been updated and will be called a student aid index. Students will no longer receive an EFC when they file the FAFSA. They will now receive a student aid index. Some points to note regarding the student aid index is it can now be negative. It can be as low as negative 1,500. Previously, the lowest EFC was 0. While the number in college is still being asked on the FAFSA, it is not included in the SAI calculation. So beginning with the 24-25 FAFSA year, there is no benefit to having more than one student in college. This does not determine the Pell Grant Award. That is based on the AGI of the student and parent. And there is a whole new calculation formula to determine this student aid index. StudentAid.gov accounts will now be required for all contributors to log into the FAFSA. A Social Security number is no longer required to create the username and password, and there is no longer going to be an option to print signature pages for a student or a parent. It does remove that ability to access the FAFSA through those personal identifiers, so both students and parents will be required to have a username and password. And just a note, this does have to be created approximately 3 days before the FAFSA is completed. When you create your username and password, the Department of Ed sends your name, date of birth, and Social Security Administration to the Social Security Administration to confirm all the information is correct. So until that confirmation happens, you will not be able to use your username or password. New this year, we have a new term called contributors. This just refers to anyone who is asked to provide information on the student's FAFSA. This could be a parent, a step-parent, and new this year a spouse. Previously, they've never asked about a student's spouse. This year they will. There is a parent wizard that is built into the FAFSA to help identify students' contributors. This will help identify the parent that should provide their information on the FAFSA. The parent that should be included is the parent that provides the most financial support. There will now be expiration dates on these FAFSAs. If the FAFSA is started and not completed within, or if there's 45 days of inactivity, the FAFSA will expire and you are required to start over. Some more changes. The family size will now be pulled directly from the student or parent tax return. Again, the number of college is still asked but is not used in the calculation, and child support received is now considered an asset and no longer income. Some more changes. The FAFSA is now going to ask some demographic questions. These are race, ethnicity, and gender questions. They're required to answer the questions, but there is an option that says prefer not to answer. These questions are not sent to schools and are not used in any aid eligibility at all. Students now do have the option to send their FAFSA information to 20 schools. That's increased from 10 in the past, and it will be available in 11 languages. New this year is the Direct Data Exchange. This is where your tax data is transferred directly from the IRS to the FAFSA. You're no longer going to be redirected through the FAFSA process. You will grant permission originally while completing the FAFSA, and that data is automatically transferred from the IRS to the FAFSA. It is considered controlled unclassified information. It's highly protected, and colleges are required to keep that information secure. So now on to the application process and the FAFSA. So what is this process? So this is the new process for the 24-25 Like I said, you have to, student, parent, spouse have to create that username or password at studentaid.gov. After they've waited their 3 days, the student can then complete the FAFSA, and they invite the parent or spouse to complete the FAFSA. Then the parent or spouse is going to receive an email from that invitation that the student sends that contains a link that student or parent or spouse can click on, and it will take them to the FAFSA so that parent or spouse can then log in and complete their portion of the FAFSA. Once the student, parent / spouse have both completed the FAFSA will then be processed by federal student aid. What does a student have to be in order to be eligible for financial aid or federal financial aid? They have to be a U.S. citizen or eligible non-citizen, have a valid Social Security number, and remember, parents aren't required to be U.S. citizens or have a Social Security number. They have to be enrolled or accepted for enrollment as a regular student in an eligible degree or certificate program, and all students are required to have a high school diploma or a GED. We do have many tutorials available to help you through the process that you can find within our financial aid webpage. They are there to help you create the usernames and passwords or complete the FAFSA. What is an FSA username or password? It is basically an electronic signature and login for all federal student aid sites. This includes the FAFSA, any teach grants, any part of the student loan process. Students and at least one parent must have a username and password. Just a reminder that parent uses the same username and password for all children or themselves if they are a student or applying for a PLUS loan. Where do you create it? Everything happens at studentaid.gov. Just a reminder, it does require a unique username and password. There is two-factor authentication, so you do have to provide a unique email or cell phone number, because when you log in, you don't just log in with your username and password. You will receive a 6-digit code to either your email or cell phone number, so you do have to authenticate that you are providing your cell phone number. Again, make sure your name, date of birth, and Social Security number match exactly as is on file with the Social Security Administration. Remember, this is going out to the Social Security Administration for the match, so these things must match exactly. Parents without a Social Security number must still create this username and password. They just answer questions from credit reporting to confirm their identity. So the year highlighted, or the line highlighted in yellow, reflects current high school seniors. They would be attending August 24 to July 25, so they're most likely graduating May, June 24, starting classes August of 2024. They would complete the 24-25 FAFSA year. It uses the 2022 taxes, and FAFSAs could be submitted beginning December 31, 2023. You can begin submitting the FAFSA anytime now. Please note that as of today, February 6th, 2024, there are still multiple issues with the FAFSA, and any student with undocumented parents is unable to submit their FAFSA at this time. The Department of Ed has not indicated when this will be corrected, but currently any student with undocumented parents is unable to complete this process. This is what the website looks like where a student applies. You can see the 24-25 FAFSA form where you can start a new form or you can edit an existing form. Also note, if you need to complete the 23-24 FAFSA form, they've kind of hidden it now, but it is in this link here where it says start or edit a 23-24 FAFSA form. So once you log in, you will then be asked, are you the student or are you the parent? You will then have the option to watch a series of videos with some additional information for what is the FAFSA form, what is a contributor, what to expect during that FAFSA process, and lastly, what's going to happen after you submit the FAFSA form. After you've gone through those screens, you will come to the student identity information. It will pull your name, date of birth, and social security number, email, phone number from your username and password that you created. Note that there's these buttons up here. There is the save button, so you can save it as you go. The FAFSA process does automatically save as you go through this various screens, but if you want to ensure it's saved, the save button is there. Note the 3 dots where you can view the status, you can get help, you can review answers, delete the FAFSA if for some reason you want to delete it, and start all over again. And then lastly, if you want to update any of the information above this line here, your name, date of birth, email, you do need to go into account settings in order to make that change. The next screen, you'll be able to enter your permanent mailing address. Then you'll be asked the student state of legal residence. And I'd just like to point out this I that is behind many of the questions. If you're not certain what to answer for these questions, if you click on that I, it will give you some additional information and help you in answering those questions. This is where you then provide consent and approval to be eligible for federal student aid. This allows the Department of Ed to get your 2022 tax information for the 24-25 FAFSA form. It does note that this tax information is required to complete the FAFSA form, and it will be used to determine your eligibility for federal student aid. You have to review this information. Then at the bottom, there's some frequently asked questions if you have some additional questions, and then you either approve or decline. Hopefully you approve, because if you don't approve, you won't be able to move on. Then it takes you to your personal circumstances. So this is the student. So it wants to know the student marital status, wants to know the student's career plans, what year will they be in college, and will they already have a bachelor's degree when they start. And remember, a bachelor's degree is a 4-year degree, not a 2-year or a high school diploma. It is a 4-year college degree. Any student personal circumstances, any other student circumstances, if they're an unaccompanied or homeless, self-supporting or homeless, and then do any unusual circumstances exist. Based on the answers to those questions, the FAFSA has now determined that this is a dependent student that is required to use parent information. It does allow you to apply for unsubsidized loans only, not recommended. If the parent is unwilling to provide information, I recommend the student reach out to the financial aid office, as we can generally work with the parents and hopefully get them to explain the situation and that parents are not liable for students' education simply by providing their information on the FAFSA. Hopefully we can get parents to submit their information. So the process we're showing today is for a dependent student who is required to use parents' information and is in fact providing parents' information. So what does it take to be an independent student? Student must be at least 24 years old, not be a graduate or professional student, be married, have legal dependents who receive more than half of their support from the student, active duty military, or an orphan or ward of the court since turning 13. So it doesn't matter where the student is claimed on taxes, where they live, or if they're actually being supported by parents. If they are single, under the age of 24, without dependents of their own, not a veteran, they do have to use parents' information. And just a reminder that if a parent, never substitute these people for parents' information. If parents are not available, these students are probably eligible for a dependency override and not required to use parents' information. So if we have a student living with any of these people and they're providing support, probably they have some kind of special circumstances. The student will then be taken to a screen that will help them determine whose parent or which parent's information they should provide. So it will first ask, are your parents married to each other? When you say yes, it will tell you provide information for both parents. So that indicates that both parents must provide information. Conversely, if you answer a little different, are your parents married to each other? If you say no, it'll take you through a series of questions then to help you determine which parent you should provide information for. So it wants to know, do your parents live together? Did one parent provide more financial support than the other in the past 12 months? And has the parent you identified in the previous question remarried? So it tells you provide information for the parent and step-parent. So it bases your information to help you determine which parent to list on the FAFSA. You're then given the opportunity to invite your parents to the FAFSA. Note the highlighted in yellow. We highly recommend you only complete the parent who will fill out this form box. Well, it provides 2 boxes for you to list both parents, in which case in this 2 parents should be listed. You'll only have 1 box if the parent is single, not remarried, divorced, or simply never married. But in this case, since we listed parents were married, there are 2 boxes, but note that it only recommends that you fill out the first box. Once you complete the parent's information and send the invitation, student will receive a note on their screen noting that the invitation has been sent. And the student moves on to the student demographics section. These are the questions that the college will never see: the gender of the student as well as their race and ethnicity. Now the student citizenship status is where we do receive this data again, if they're a citizen or eligible non-citizen. Parent education status, if parents completed college. If a student had a parent killed in the line of duty. The student high school completion status, when they begin the 24-25 year, will they have a high school diploma? Then it wants to know what high school did that student graduate from. And again, I recommend putting in only the city and the state and then doing a search, because many high schools have unique names that aren't always what we would traditionally call the high school. So for example, here, Austin Senior High, if you would have searched Austin High School, you would have not found the high school. So strongly recommend you only put in the city and state and then do a search. Then there's finances for the student. And the nice thing about this screen is this reflects every question you could see. But if you on your tax return did not have a rollover at all, you will not see those first questions or have any questions regarding a rollover, and will only have the last 2 questions. Then it asks about asset, the current net worth of your cash savings and checking account, then the net worth of investments, including any real estate, and the current net worth of an investment farm or a business. New this year, the Department of Education has defined differently what an asset is, and assets should be noted as of the day the FAFSA is completed. So what should be included? Money in your cash savings and checking account. And in red, you will see the farm you own and operate This includes any land, livestock, machinery. It's in red because this is the first year that they're including the value of a farm. So any value of the farm that you own, and you farm the ground, you work the cattle, you have the hogs, that is all considered an asset now. Be sure that you take the net worth though, take that investment less any debt, and only list the net worth. Any investments including CDs, stocks, bonds, or mutual funds. Any rental real estate, including the land that you own but you do not farm, or a house you own but you rent out. Any trust funds, and then any business you own and operate. Be sure to include the value of that. And again, that's in red because that's new this year. Previously, that was not included as an asset. So what is not included? The home you live in is not an asset. Any retirement account, it doesn't matter if it's personally held, if it's employer funded, or where the retirement account is or what kind. Any retirement funds are not considered an asset. Any value of life insurance and the cars that you own are not an asset. Then the student is taken to select colleges. Student, and again, I recommend listing the state and city and ensure that you are choosing to find the correct college. Some things to note: it will indicate how many schools you have selected. And as you complete this process, for example, here we put in Minnesota and Austin, did the search, Riverland came up, you choose the select button, and before you go to the next screen, if you want to add more colleges, you would change the city and state and choose the select button for those colleges. So you don't move on from this screen until you've selected all the colleges that you are interested in attending. You'll then receive a note of, okay, here are the colleges that you have listed. You can remove them, you can view info, which is the graduation rate, debt rate, those kind of things are found when you view the info. And the student is basically done. You'll see all of the green circles with the check marks indicating those areas are complete. If you click on the circle with a little down arrow, it will expand and you'll see every question under that. And just a note, you will see every question that is asked, even if the student didn't have to answer it. So for example, there is some skip logic. So in the question, if you're a US citizen or an eligible non-citizen, if a student is an eligible non-citizen, they will be asked for their alien registration number. When a student is a US citizen, they'll see that they did not complete the alien registration number. That question, when you click the drop down, will be blank. So just a heads up that every question that could be asked will be listed when you click on that down arrow, not just the questions that you saw. Student is required then to provide their signature. This is a sign and complete your section that you review, and if you agree that you provided the true and correct information, you click on the box and the student will click the sign button. And it says, hey, you're almost done. Your contributors have been invited but not yet completed their information. The parent then will receive an email saying, hey, your student has invited you to help them complete the FAFSA. And it has the login button there that you can see where you can click to log in. Once the parent logs in, they will see that the student wants their help and has identified them as the parent, and they can accept or they can decline the invitation. Again, a reminder, if you decline the information, your student is not eligible for any federal student aid. So we recommend you go back and accept that. If you accept, it lets you know that the Department of Ed will use some personal information we already have on file to fill out the necessary steps of the FAFSA. Go ahead and continue. And again, parent contributing to the FAFSA gives you a little bit of information. And the parent then will see the same 4 screens of what is the FAFSA form, who are contributors, what to expect, after submitting the FAFSA form. So that are exactly the same screens that the student sees and the same videos the student can watch before completing the FAFSA. The parent then is asked to provide consent. So again, the parent has the opportunity to get your 2022 tax return information for the 24-25 FAFSA form. It's used to determine eligibility for federal student aid, and it is required to complete the FAFSA. Again, lots of text to read, but then you should accept. The parent then goes on to their identity information, and again, this is pulled directly from the username and password with the parent, now this time their name, social security number, email, and their mailing address. Parent demographics section wants to know parent current marital status, parent state of legal residence, and the date they became residents of that state, the month and year. Then we go on to parent finances, and it just wants to know some information about some federal programs that the family could be participating in. Note that everybody in Minnesota gets free and reduced price lunches, but you should only check that box if you qualify for the federal program. If you're simply getting free and reduced price lunches because the state of Minnesota is providing them and your income guidelines don't meet them to receive the federal benefit, then you should not check that box. The parent is then asked if the tax return that they filed in 2022 was a joint tax return with their current spouse. If they say yes, then they're taken on to the next process. The parent is then asked if their family size is different from the number of individuals claimed on that 2022 tax return. If you say no, the bottom portion of this screen will not appear. If you say yes, this is where you have the opportunity to update the FAFSA so it reflects your current family size. And what it asks is it says, hey, the parent family size currently is 3 because it's the parent, the spouse, and the student. And it wants to know how many other dependents live with the parents. So how many additional people in addition to that 3 are in the family's household. And like I said, it still asks number in college, but it does not impact a student's eligibility. And again, this is additional tax information that is not pulled directly from the tax return. And again, if you did not have an IRA rollover at all, you will not see the first 2 questions. And this screen is only seen by somebody who says that they are currently married and filed a joint tax return. So it wants to know who is your current parent, spouse, or partner. So of the parent who's completing this FAFSA, who is their current spouse or partner? And this is just done to confirm that the parent that you're saying here that is your spouse or partner is in fact the spouse that is listed on the tax return in 2022. Then again, this is where the asset question comes in for the parents. So it wants to know if there was any annual child support received, parent asset, current net worth of investments, current net worth of business or investment farm. And again, assets are as of the day the FAFSA is completed and exactly the same as what they were for the parents. So be sure you include items that should be included, exclude what should be excluded, remembering that the farm you own and operate and the business you own and operate are both now included as assets. That again is new this year and should be included. Parent then is noted that their section is done. Other than signing, they have that chance to review. Parent is able to review this section, check the box, and sign it. And the FAFSA is done and complete. Just some notes to let you know, once you provide consent, you will receive an email from Federal Student Aid letting you know that the email is basically confirming your consent to use and disclose federal tax information to request that information and use it when completing the FAFSA. And the box on the right-hand side is just a note that once you have granted consent, whether it's for student 1 and you've got 2 students, and so your second student, you'll receive this notice that you've already approved the disclosure of your tax information and that you don't need to approve it again. By moving on through this process, your tax data will also be transferred to this FAFSA. So the post-application process and awards. You've submitted your FAFSA to Department of Ed. Now what happens? The 24-25 FAFSA timeline is a little different this year than it has been previously. Normally the FAFSA opens October 1st. This year it did not open till December 31st. The FAFSA can be completed online currently. Paper applications can be completed and submitted, but absolutely nothing is happening with those FAFSAs. The Department of Education is not processing any FAFSAs. Originally, colleges were to receive, and the Department of Ed was going to begin processing those FAFSAs by the end of January. On January 30th, 2024, Department of Education announced that FAFSA processing and this would be delayed until mid-March of 2024. So again, this is our current timeline. Department of Education is always subject to change anything, but as of today, February 6, 2024, this is our current timeline. So as of mid-March, colleges should begin receiving processed FAFSA data. Students will receive their FAFSA submission summary. Sometime, we're hoping during spring of 24, students will begin receiving preliminary and official award letters. Another new item for the 24-25 year is the FAFSA submission summary. Anybody who has done a FAFSA previously knows that there was a student aid report that a student received. This year they call it a FAFSA submission summary. This is basically the document that gives you some basic information about your eligibility for federal student aid and includes some of the answers from the FAFSA form. It does also contain that student aid index. And remember, while this slide says it's not available till February, it has not been updated yet. March 2024 is when that is available. Student will receive an email when this FAFSA submission summary is available to them. They will have to log in using their username and password to access their information. At the same time that student receives the email, the college also will receive that information electronically. This is a last year screenshot. Currently, a student, once they submit their FAFSA, is not able to make any changes. If you log in after submitting that FAFSA, student will see their FAFSA is currently on hold. Once it is processed, the corrections process will resume. This is last year's screenshot. I do not have a current screenshot to show you, but just know that there will be a process to make corrections. Anybody who submits a FAFSA may be chosen for verification. This is the process where the Department of Education randomly chooses a FAFSA and then requires that the college confirm the information entered on the FAFSA. So what can be verified? The number of household members, any IRS data from the federal tax return if it's not transmitted, if you were unable to use the direct data exchange, any income earned from work, a high school completion status, or an identity statement of educational purpose. Some things to note for professional judgment. Normally a family's aid is based on income from a previous tax year. So for the 24-25 FAFSA, we are using 2022 income. We also understand that 2022 income isn't always reflective of a family's current income. So this gives the financial aid administrator the ability to say, to use more current year tax information when completing the FAFSA. So originally the student must complete their FAFSA using the 2022 income information. If in fact this is your case, we recommend you reach out to the college where your student is attending, notify them that you've seen a change in income, and request a professional judgment or special circumstance. We also have dependency overrides. This gives the financial aid administrator the ability to take a student who would normally be dependent and allow them to be independent. This is in cases of parental abuse, abandonment, incarceration. This is the high school student who never goes home and is a college couch surfer. The parents who just don't care, who are maybe abusing their children, so the student is not going home because if they did, they would be abused. It does require documentation by someone outside of the immediate family, and again, you have to go to the financial aid office where your student is attending in order for this to be processed. Once you submit all documentation the college requested, you should receive an award notice from each college on the FAFSA. Remember, financial aid is going to vary based on cost. Confirm credit levels for awards, and compare net cost after grants and scholarships. So, calculating awards and sources of funding. How does the college determine awards, and what kind of awards is that student going to see on their award letter? Colleges are first required to determine a cost of attendance, and these are direct and indirect costs. So costs that must be paid to the college and costs that the student incurs because they are a college student. So tuition and fees, those costs that are paid directly to the college. Housing and food, which could be paid to the college, or they could be living off campus or with parents. So depends on what their living arrangements are. Books and supplies, which again could be purchased from the college or other sources. Transportation, which would be the student expense of getting to and from college, to and from internships, and then other miscellaneous and personal expenses. So your personal expenses that it costs you to live. Then we have to look at the student aid index and determine a portion that's coming from a student contribution, student income and assets, and a parent contribution for dependent students, obviously. And then we come up with a measurement of the students and families' ability to pay for educational expenses. So then we are required to take the cost of attendance minus the student aid index, indicates financial need for a student. So aid award that you will see on a student award letter. First is the federal Pell Grant. This is the money from the federal government. The nice thing about this is that it is unlimited. Doesn't matter if you apply early or late. If your student is eligible for a Pell Grant, they will receive that. The federal supplemental grant is for students who have the highest need. These are our students who have the lowest income and require the most assistance. We have the Teach Grant for our students who are going into the education field and want to be teachers. Just a note, this is free money unless the student does not teach in a low-income school for 5 years after graduation. So as part of taking the Teach Grant, a student is committing to teaching in a low-income school for 5 years post-graduation. If they do not, then that Teach Grant becomes a student loan. Federal Work Study is a job that a student does on campus. It's just the funding for their paycheck comes from Federal Work Study. We have the Federal Direct Student Loans, which the student takes out, and then the Federal Plus Loan, which the parent takes out. Some additional information on those student loans. So just because you file the FAFSA doesn't allow the student loan to be processed. The student has to do some additional steps. In addition to the FAFSA, student has to do a promissory note and entrance counseling. So the promissory note is the form that the student signs that says they promise to repay. Entrance counseling lets the student know a little bit about student loans, their rights and responsibilities. So federal student loans are borrowed money that must be repaid. The lender is the federal government. The student is the borrower and responsible for repayment. The parent has no liability in this at all. School will award the loan, and the student must complete the additional steps to receive the funds. No credit check or employment history. A student simply has to be enrolled, taking 6 or more credits, and they are eligible for student loans. No payment or repayment is required while the student is in college taking 6 or more credits, and they do have a 6 months grace after they stop attending. Subsidized are the very best loans where the government is paying all of the interest while the student is in college. So on the subsidized loans, the value of those loans are not growing. The unsubsidized loans are very similar, except for the interest is not paid by the government. So those loans are going to grow a little bit every year. Parent Plus loan is exactly the opposite of the student loan. It is a parent loan. It also requires some additional steps. It requires the Plus application and the promissory note. So if the parent wants to borrow a parent loan, they do have to do some additional steps. It does require a credit check. Parent has the option, payment can begin immediately, or they can defer payment until 6 months after the student is enrolled. Then we've got a list of the Minnesota student aid programs. Biggest program is the Minnesota State Grant Program. That a student just has to be a graduate of the state of Minnesota and have income guidelines to be eligible, and they will receive that Minnesota State grant. We've got a couple of Indian scholarships, the Minnesota Indian Scholarship and the American Indian Scholars Program. Those are both for our Native American students. We have the post-secondary child care grant. That is for our students who have children in daycare while they're attending college. The Minnesota GI Bill is for our students who are veterans or in the military. Fostering Independence Grant is for our students who have been in foster care while they were in high school. Then we have the North Star Promise Scholarship. I've got a screen with some additional information, but that is guaranteed tuition and fees coverage for our students who have family income under $80,000. And then lastly is the DREAM Act state grant. This requires a separate application, but I just wanted to note that for our students who are not legal U.S. citizens but meet guidelines, they could apply for the DREAM Act. North Star Promise Scholarship. It is a brand new program for the 24-25 year. It requires a student be a Minnesota resident and attend a Minnesota State College or university. If they meet those two guidelines and have an adjusted gross income below $80,000, that student will have all their tuition and fees covered by this grant minus any other Pell Strait or grant that they receive. It is like I said, a last dollar award, so it takes tuition and fees minus all other awards to determine their actual funding level. Then there's scholarships. There's a variety. Some require an application, some require a tryout, an audition, but it just depends on the scholarship what is required. Some are need-based, some are merit-based, athletic, and depending on the college where your student is going, the eligibility and the availability of these could be very different. So just be sure and investigate any scholarship opportunities that you may have. We then have alternative loans, and alternative loans are available from many different sources. Be careful when you're requesting an alternative loan. Each college has a list of colleges or of lenders that they work with on a pretty regular basis. These are educational alternative loans, so they provide the advantage of lower interest rates. The funds proceeds are paid directly to the school, so you're guaranteed your student's tuition will be paid, and they defer payment until after the student graduates. So be sure if you need additional loan funds, you reach out to the college where your student is attending, and you can get a list of those student loans that your student could apply for. Tuition reciprocity is a process where a student who is a Minnesota resident attends a neighboring state at a rate similar to a Minnesota resident rate. I did list the website here where you'll need to apply, but just an FYI, be sure that you submit that application each year. Higher education and tax savings incentives, what exists? Every year at the same time that you're getting your W-2s, you should get a 1098-T that will indicate the amount of tuition paid and can be used for any or all of these tax credits. My recommendation is to take your 1098-T to your tax preparer, and they can best advise you which one of these tax credits you qualify and which ones will best benefit you. So where do you go from here? Be sure you look at and review any admission and financial aid materials, deadlines, meet all application deadlines, complete the FAFSA and any other application materials, investigate all other sources of financial aid. Remember, FAFSA is not a one and done. You have to submit a new FAFSA every year. And this is my information should you want to reach out or have any additional questions. Thank you.